Hello everybody, my name is Aceface. We're in another episode in the T0 to T6 Abyss series. This will be a bit of a shorter episode because it was, unfortunately, an error happened when I was recording this video. For some reason, my microphone was not recording anything. I had to restart my microphone and suddenly it worked again. This has happened actually a couple of times before, but luckily I was able to catch it when I'm recording in the recording software. I usually do a quick test before. And this was one of the few times that I decided not to do the test. And that was also when it happened to be where the microphone wasn't working, which actually doesn't happen at all, particularly often to begin with. So it was a bit of an unfortunate occurrence here. But in short, this was another T0 to T6 Abyss run, T4 Abyss run. It was not a particularly profitable one. It was pretty average. Just got 23 million ISK. And it was no particularly difficult waves, just chill waves. What we had here was the sleepers here. The sleepers and sentinels, and then some drifters. And then later in the video we had you can see here the incom waves. They were pretty easy as well. There was no particularly deadly ones here. And then if we go to the last wave, we had a bunch of rogue drones. This rogue drone wave was a bit more profitable than the other waves because it had a lot of loot in these extractioners. We've got quite a lot of loot from these ones here. Otherwise, overall, the run was not particularly strong, or like strong in terms of, not maybe strong is the wrong word, particularly profitable or valuable. But the thing I wanted to discuss in this video was that I was actually discussing in the video, and I really wanted to get with in the video, and I was a bit sad is that the microphone recording wasn't available. So I wanted to discuss this with you guys again. But I apologize that the T0 to T6 Abyss series might seem a bit monotonous, because it is, at least in my opinion, it is very monotonous. And that is how it is in EVE Online. When you're doing grinding after grinding after grinding of the same site, it is obviously going to get monotonous. Even if you encounter a lot of these waves being very different in terms of composition, you eventually run into them again, and it's nothing new, with pretty much the same fit as well. But it's just the way it is. We're getting ourselves to T5 Abyss, which will eventually get to T6 Abyss. It takes a long time, and quite justifiably, I think it takes a long time, because the amount of ISK you get from this in high sec, I think that it is very reasonable that it takes a long time to grind for a very expensive ship to be able to run these reliably. You can obviously make a fit that is able to run T5 and T6 Abyss with like maybe ancillary shield boosters that is maybe a one-off able to run one T5 side, but probably is going to get eliminated in multiple rooms. So this was something I just wanted to apologize, because it's just the nature of this. The way it is, it's just the nature of this. I remember in the beginning of the T0 to T6 Abyss series, it was a lot more action-packed, because there was a lot of fits all being altered all the time. Almost every other episode, we were getting new alterations that are fit to become more powerful, more skills being trained, and the new tiers. But eventually, when we came to T4, we can see here that many episodes, I'm not sure how many episodes, but I think it's probably like 30, 40 maybe even episodes, that we have just been using the same fit, the same filament type. And it's just because the next tier of Abyss is the T4 Firestorm Abyss, which is in this series. And that is basically, you could say, a toned down version of my T5 fit. And the reason T4 Firestorm, why T4 Electric, T4 Firestorm, why is the bother of switching here? You're not going up the filament type. It's just because it's a lot more profitable if you are able to actually run T4 Firestorm, because the filaments are very cheap. So they're a lot more profitable in general. I mentioned this a lot. T4 Firestorm is very profitable, but they're also pretty difficult to run compared to the electrics, because the electrics, they have the capacitor bonus. So we're going to be using a lot more expensive fit in the T4 Firestorms to be able to compensate for that lack of the capacitor bonus. So we're soon there, T4 Firestorm Abyss. I keep saying soon there, but we are soon there. And then the next step then will be to T5. And that will also take quite a bit of time, but maybe not as much time as before, because it's about 1 billion extra ISK required on top of that T4 fit, T4 Firestorm that is fit, to be able to do to T5. We will be getting more ISK from the T4s, or Firestorms though. So I know we'll see. That is at least the plan here. The plan here is to go to T4 Firestorm and the T5 Electrics. I was considering before in the previous videos that I was going to go with the cheaper variant, or slightly cheaper variant of the T5 Electrics fit. It was using one damage module, and that it was pretty tanky, pretty beefy. I was actually overall quite happy with it, but the main issue was just that its time was lacking. The time could come close sometimes. It was very slow at running the site, so I was not a particularly big fan of that. I didn't like that too much, but it is getting slow. It is getting monotonous. I understand that it's getting a bit boring, But that's how it's going to be. I've decided to make it my mission to do a series where we go from T0 to T6 Abyss, and we're going to go there and document everything as far as I can tell. Now, everything is not fully documented in this episode, as you can see here, because we had some errors with the recording software. But apart from that, we are going to show everything, and we're going to show exactly how much effort is required to get to T6 Abyss, which, spoiler, is quite a lot of effort, and understandably as well, because you earn tons and tons of ISK when you get to T6. But what I'm going to do is when I get to T6, I mean, it's not like I'm going to run a ton of T6 site. I'm just going to go run one T6 site and that's it. We're done. We're done with that. We don't have to continue grinding these, because I want to do another series later, which is going to likely involve, not 100% guaranteed this is how it's going to turn out, but I want to do something where we go focus a little bit lower tier, not T6, but maybe T4 or T5, and then we focus on getting there as quick as possible, and that will probably involve more profitable filaments as well. So not just T4, like not such a big focus on the tier as we're doing here, but rather focusing on the profit. So we'll probably put a bigger focus on doing certain filament types that are more profitable, such as the darks, such as the Firestorms, or maybe even low tiers, T2s, electrics, because T2 electrics, they're very good because they're very cheap, but you still get that good electrical bonus. You understand what I mean? Like the electrical bonus where you get the capacitor bonus. So there's certain filaments that for their price are actually very profitable to run. So that's probably what my focus is going to be on next, because to be honest, I think the T6 is not for everyone. Some people, I mean, you'd require a ton of ISK to run T6, ton of ISK. It's pretty much impossible to run T6 in a cheap fit. I think you can get cheaper fits, not cheap, but cheaper fits for T4 and maybe T5. T5 I think is still pretty borderline to be able to go with cheap fits, but I think that you can definitely run a relatively cheap fit in T4 and maybe a little bit, like just add on a little bit to that and get to T5. I think that I'll be putting a lot more focus on the skills here, because it's been gone quite a bit of time in this T0 to T6 bit series, and we've actually completely trained all the specialization, level 5, everything off the bat for this Zealot fit. And now the only thing we need is ISK. And I think it would be better maybe if we were to have something like get the skills trained a little bit later and be able to earn the ISK a bit quicker. That is maybe difficult, especially if I play a little bit rare. There's usually going to naturally be the case that I'll be training everything first and earning the ISK later, because the ISK is not really requires much passive time, rather that requires more active time. So I think it is not particularly uncommon that we will be training almost all the skills first and then getting to the desired tier later. But I think I will be putting some slightly more, you could say, less ambitious goals and tiers, and more on being able to run the really good filaments. Like, for example, I think that having a goal to run the T5 Firestorm would be a really good goal. T5 Firestorm would be a really good goal, because that filament is a filament that I like a lot, because it's still not as difficult as T6, but you earn a ton of profit just due to the fact that the filaments, they cost so little, and you're still going to be able to run them with the T5. It's T5 difficulty, so it's still not as difficult as T6, but they are pretty difficult to run. It is a Firestorm site. You've got increased armor HP of enemies. You've got reduced thermal resist, which is very unfavorable for your survival in the Abyss, just because there's a lot of incoming thermal DPS in the Abyss. So it is hard, but something like that could be a goal. Or maybe even T5 Dark could be a goal, just because these kind of sites are very profitable in terms of like the actual profit. Maybe the tier is not as high as T6, like I said, or tier down, but in terms of having it as a goal for profit, and especially they're not having to require to have like a 4-5 billion ISK ship, I think that would be a very good goal to have. And even maybe we could have like a T0 to T4 Abyss series, like, I guess this T4 as quick as possible, and maybe T4 Dark or T4 Firestorm. Those are very reasonable goals, I think, and maybe not everyone wants to invest so much into an Abyss ship, so I think those could be very good alternatives to do. Because I've actually already got a few T4 and T5, or not T4, T4 Dark and T4 Firestorm Abyss fits that are not particularly expensive. So this is something I was discussing a lot in this episode here. I was just discussing that the series is getting a bit monotonous just because of us having to grind so much to get to the next tier of Abyss. I'm pointing here, I was discussing how certain modules become so much more expensive the higher tier you get. And that's something I noticed, is that when it comes to T4, to be honest, for me, personally, I think that's the sweet spot in terms of how much you have to invest in your ship and how much you get in terms of the profit. Because here, you can still rely, and the reason I think it's like this is because like you can still rely to quite a big degree on Tech 2 modules in the T4. Not completely, you still need a bit of bling here and there, usually in most cases you need a bit of bling here and there, but you don't need to go all out on the bling. What I mean by this is that my T4 hybrid Gila that I use for T4 Firestorms is pretty good. It's able to run them, but it's using some Tech 2 modules or some cheap faction modules, like it's got a C-type medium shield booster, a Pitham C-type medium shield booster, and that is the most expensive module on the ship, and that costs 70 million ISK. So it's nothing crazy. But someday when you get to T5, you have to use much more expensive modules, much more expensive modules, because usually you will then have to take like an A-type, X-type, or the highest tier of tank module, like an A-type armor repair, or an X-type large shield booster, or an A-type medium shield booster, because you could go maybe up the tier, maybe go to B-type, but when you're going to anyway upgrade it, you sort of may as well upgrade to the highest tier just to get the most out of it, and you've already got that module there and get the most amount of tank out of that slot there. And the price increase from C-type to like B and A-type, X-type, like increases exponentially. So that's why in general I find the fits to do T5 and T6 especially are so much more expensive than T4s, and also in proportion to how much you get. Still, don't get me wrong, you earn so much is from T5 and T6, a lot more than T4, but still I think that, in my opinion, T4 is really a sweet spot type of tier to be able to run, especially when you're going with Darks and Firestorms, because then the profit margins are going to be very high. So having a series that will focus on that, in my opinion, will be a very good and useful guide for people, and people who want to earn some ISK, or just you can do some abyss, maybe a little bit more casually, sort of min-maxing on it and not having to invest so much into it. So that's enough for now. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. That was another T0 to T6 abyss series where we earned about like 20-something million ISK and discussing future plans, and also how it's maybe been a little bit grindy, but that's just the way it is. We're going to have to document everything for the T0 to T6 abyss series. This actually is episode 100, and we've done 100. That's a lot of videos, but we're going to have to just continue here because we have to chug away to get T6. Soon there, only 2 more tiers, 2 big jumps left. If you did enjoy the video or learn something new, please leave a like and subscribe. I'll catch you guys later.